And now I turn the podium over to our President and CEO, Mark Vogt.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, everybody. Between the annual report that you received earlier this month and the presentations given already tonight, I hope we have given you a sense for how we have been trying to look out for you during the past year in the key areas of retail competitiveness, electric reliability, member service, customer satisfaction, and financial stability. Our goal in 2011 is to provide you the very same or better outcome. So I want to use my time tonight to offer an impression of how we need to go about that work this year. And I call that out especially because the rules of the game have just changed. In fact, 2010 marked the moment when sudden, swift, and substantial changes were put into law about how we must make, deliver, and price your electricity. My aim tonight is to provide you a basic understanding of the many new rules that have been put into place for the electric industry. I want you to leave here knowing how these laws might affect you. I want you to know how Wright-Hennepin is reacting to them, and I want to suggest how you can help your cooperative achieve equal or better outcomes for this year. So let's get started. This chart identifies the federal energy laws and regulations passed just since 2008, along with the schedule of implementation. This chart does not include anything passed at the state level, which I might say is every bit as aggressive. Industry experts call this chart the train wreck, and for good reason. The level of legislative and regulatory activity is unprecedented in so compressed a time. It's overwhelming the system. It's piling up new cost after new cost on the production of electricity. It's just now beginning to noticeably show on consumers' electric bills across Minnesota. And if these laws are left unchanged, to borrow the words from an old movie, you haven't seen anything yet. Now, let me say before I go too much farther that I'm not suggesting that we abandon all regulation and all oversight. I'm not saying that at all. Quite frankly, that wouldn't be safe, it wouldn't be in the consumer's best interests, and it wouldn't be productive. But I am here to say that our state and national energy policy must do a better job of striking a balance. We need to equally balance affordability, reliability, efficiency, along with environmental responsibility. In recent years, these laws have been greatly out of balance, and we are just now starting to see the consequences. Let me give you just one example of what I mean. And to keep this as locally focused as possible, I'll cite a number of new energy laws that were passed by the Minnesota legislature in 2007 and had their first real implementation last year. These new laws are intended to encourage more use of renewable energy, energy efficiency, and energy conservation in the state. And no one takes issue with that. But we do take issue with how the law is being implemented, because it is quickly turning into a double cost for you. Here's how that's happening. Each year, starting already last year and going forward, more and more renewable energy needs to be used in place of existing fossil fuel produced power, so that in 14 years, 25% of Minnesota's electricity will come from wind, solar, or biomass generation. In its early implementation, This means Wright-Hennepin's power suppliers and every other electric utility in the state are being forced under the law to idle existing fossil fuel power plants so that wind energy can be used in their place. Now, the practical reality of this is that we now not only have the existing expense of idled fossil fuel plants, but we also now have the new expense of building replacement wind generation. It would be like having two homes with two mortgages, but the law says that from now on you can only use one of those homes. As recent news stories have said, this is the primary reason why electric utility rates in Minnesota are on a sharp incline, as this graph shows. Another report that just came out this month notes that in 1990, Minnesota had the 9th lowest price of electricity in the United States. 2 decades later, by 2009, Minnesota's ranking had already slipped to 20th. By getting ready to implement these new rules, we've already become less competitive with other states. At the very least, this is reason for caution about our present course. And the situation rightly asks, where might it all lead? For whatever it's worth, I took a stab at an answer for your consideration. The first bar on this graph shows the present average monthly cost for residential usage at Wright-Hennepin. It's about $107 for 1,000 kilowatt hours. I'm now contrasting Wright-Hennepin's price to the current price for the same amount of electricity in several states of our nation, as well as several countries in Europe. These states and European countries are much further ahead in the implementation of similar laws that we're just starting to put into practice. And you can see the effect on the monthly price of electricity. When you spend more money on energy, you spend less on everything else your family needs. For the economic effects on working families alone, we believe our current energy laws and regulations need to be rebalanced if Wright-Hennepin is going to provide the desired outcomes for you in 2011. If these laws are not rebalanced, our hands will be bound and tied behind our backs in trying to do some of the competitive things that we have done in the past. Another reason for rebalancing is this. In their present form, these just implemented state laws ban the use of new coal-fired generating plants as a future power supply for Minnesota utilities. Now, that's important to understand because more than half of the electricity used in the state right now comes from coal-fired generation. That ban, along with the setback to the nuclear industry following the earthquake in Japan, creates serious questions about if Minnesota utilities will have the generating resources to power the economic recovery when that starts. That's because these new laws have virtually left Minnesota with just 2 power supply options going forward. One is natural gas for now, and the other is renewables. Among states that presently rely on fossil fuel, including California, Minnesota is the only one that has imposed this kind of aggressive restriction on the future production of electricity. I read something interesting last Thursday. It said that the price of natural gas for power production has already gone up 10% since the incidents at the nuclear plant in Japan. So one wonders what will happen to the price of natural gas to make our electricity if competing fuels are permanently outlawed. By so limiting our supply options, one has to also wonder about future reliability. The big industrial wind generators that Minnesota is betting a big part of its future on produce power only 35 to 45% of the time because the wind doesn't always blow. So there are